Hello, I want to thank you all for coming for our PLC meeting. This is my signature assessment for my very last master's class, so I'm excited about that. I appreciate you all coming in here and viewing my presentation. So I chose Closing the Gap, Differentiating Instruction. So the table of contents, you have a copy of the agenda and the table of contents along with the articles on the desk that I have for you. So I have a vision statement, and then in part one, I'm going to discuss and identify the problem that I saw in my classroom and that I know that we've all talked about. And so part one will have research articles. And then part two, I actually talk about the solution and the interventions and the next steps that I think we can take. So for my vision statement, I said I will provide a nurturing and productive learning environment that will produce emotional, social, and academic success for all students. I think that produces well-rounded students. And my goal is to prepare students to be problem solvers so that they can strive in the 21st century. So in identifying the problem, in my classroom I discovered that I needed to close the learning gap. There's a big learning gap for the students. So I wanted to do this by differentiating instruction, and I know how important that is. So when I was going to find articles on something I wanted to do, I found an article on differentiating instruction that I thought was very important. So I have two articles that I have printed out for you all, and I would also be happy to email those to you. So the first one just talks about how it is important in all schools across the country that it's getting more and more difficult for people to differentiate. There's so many literacy needs and interests, and the strengths are so wide in our students today that differentiating instruction is just becoming increasingly important, and that you really need to do it to have high levels of literacy. So it talks about grouping students appropriately for reading elements. So it talks about putting them in small groups, flexible groups, maybe even differentiating products, the processes that you go through. So, and it also goes on to talk about how they did a study in the first article. They did a study from kindergarten to third grade, and they talked about how much greater gains that they made in word reading comprehension when their students differentiated instruction. And they used small group, flexible learning groups. They used centers, so that they still did that along with the whole group. But they found that when they differentiated in small group, that they were getting better outcomes. And of course, differentiating is great instruction, a great way to honor diversity, and we know how important honoring diversity is in today's time. So they had in that article steps about how to apply differentiating instruction. So they were just talking about how you have to access or assess students carefully with formative assessments, using tools, analyze their results, and see different patterns and needs that these students are developing. So strategies, again, can be the process, the materials that you use, even the environment to differentiate that. So, and then another way that the article talks about differentiating is using graphic organizers, which I know we do a really great job using in our team. We use those as whole group, and we also, I know, have different ones that we use with level readers in our small reading groups. So this brings me to the diagnostic reading series that I wanted to test out into my classroom and present to you all because I think it's a great program. It actually is, it's a series that lets you identify and assess students' level of mastery for 12 reading strategies. And so it contains pre-test, benchmarks, and post-test so that we can see how they are doing throughout the different levels. There's 10 levels in a series. So I look at it as cars help us to drive the stars. So the STARS program, the cars is where all the testing is, the benchmarks, and tells us what they need to work on, and then the STARS is the actual instructional book that helps give us all the instructions and how to master each reading strategy. So the design in the article, the Carson STARS program, the design was actually to test and see if it improved reading strategies, which they did improve greatly. They did a 3 and a 7 year trial on 2 different levels, and the 3-year results showed that their treatment group scored way higher on post-test, and they also did really well on the 7-year also. That is just some of the results. So as you see, this was in the article, and this is some of the group that was scoring a little lower. So you see the light blue is their pre-test that they took, and then they have post-test in the darker blue. And here are some higher scoring students, and you can still see that they made gains in their strategies. So in addressing the issue, I took a look at Hansen that I got on our report card at the state. And we have that we want to demonstrate proficiency in reading from 50 to 60% using Spring Map assessment. And then I also put down some test scores that I got from K-Prep. Also the gap group for reading was 21.2%. So we want to make sure that we close that gap, the achievement gap in the students, and we can use CARS and STARS diagnostic reading series to do that. It will identify and assess their level of mastery for 12 reading strategies. Here is our current practice and what we're already doing. We already do whole group. I know, like I said, we do graphic organizers with whole group. We also, I know on our team, we pull small group, we follow journeys, and we pull small group and we do level readers and differentiated graphic organizers with that. And then we also already do explicit 1, 2, and 3 tier instruction. So our proposed solution is to follow CARS and STARS and to implement it and differentiate instruction according to what skill that they are needing. So if you notice, I have the 12 skills that CARS and STARS they test on and they build their skills on. So they do finding main idea, fact and detail, understanding sequence, recognizing cause and effect, comparing and contrasting, making predictions, finding word meaning and content, drawing conclusion and making inferences, distinguishing between fact and opinion, identifying author's purpose in interpreting figurative language, and distinguishing between real and make-believe. So in my interventions, first I gave the CARS pretest. I wanted to determine the skills they needed to master in order to close the achievement gap. And so the very first thing I did, the first assessment is pretty unanimous. The whole group as a whole, they were really low on distinguishing fact and opinion. So I decided, I followed the steps in the STARS instructional book, and I taught as a whole group, I taught distinguishing fact and opinion. So here's the different steps that you follow. You can do it daily. Some doesn't take as long as others if you need to double up, but there is 5, so you could do 5 daily and then do a post-test afterwards. So the first thing you do is you think about the strategy. It's got really good ideas to help them think about how they could use it in real life. It helps to put it in real life perspective. Then they learn about the strategy, they check their understanding, they build on what they've already learned, and then they prepare for the test. So they prepare for the post-test. So first, what I did is I taught, like I said, I taught fact and opinion as a whole group. But then when I modified for my second week, I went on and I taught it in small groups. So after I did my post-test and I saw that some of my friends needed drawing conclusions. So I broke them into groups, and then I differentiated into small groups instead of doing it all in whole groups. So that's how I modified it and I changed it up. So the data that I collected on the pretest, the very first one for fact and opinion, they scored a 39%. So a few, they got it, but I knew that with such a low percentage and the way some of the questions are worded on some of the tests that it would benefit them from getting it whole group also. So the post-test, when we took that, we were up to 91%. Then on the pre-test for drawing conclusions, they started out at 62%, and then by their post-test, they were at a 96%. And so the ones that did not master the distinguishing fact and opinion, I pulled them into small groups, and I pulled some others in different groups. But I focused on these to get my data. So as you can see, the blue is the pretest on fact and opinion and on drawing conclusion, and then you can see on fact and opinion and on drawing conclusion how much they grew just with those 5 steps using the cars and stars. Okay, so the next step that I plan on taking, I'm going to continue to use the strategies, and I'm going to continue to see what gains they make. Academically, I think if they make academic gains, then they're also going to gain confidence, and then I'll also see participation. Because we know if they're very confident, then they're going to participate more, and I think that's going to really help them. So, and also I'm going to see if different interests, if different topics make a difference, especially in the grades, because I know different, the different topics interest different ones, and some are more interesting than others, so we'll see. And then the next step is trying to apply these skills that they learn in Cars and Stars in other content areas, such as science, because we know how important it is to be able to interpret and comprehend science. So I'm eager to see what it is in other content areas. And there's my reference page. So if you all have any questions, you can feel free to ask or email me. And I appreciate you coming to my presentation. So thank you all very much.